All right. So, hello, this is Krista with the lifeinprogress.ca. And I am very happy to be chatting with, I think, my first kind of local people for an interview. That makes me happy. I had actually wanted to connect with you guys a long time ago, and then life happened. So today, so I just want to check here because this will be on the recording, but you guys, who do you see right now? Do you see my face as I'm talking? I only see Mackenzie. You do? Okay, so hopefully it's just recording well so it doesn't stay stuck on one person. Okay, so today, actually, and I forgot to ask, do you like Mackenzie or Mac?
I typically go by Mac,
Oh,
but my adult name is Mackenzie.
okay. Well, so Matricia and Mackenzie Brown are the First Nations Cree mother-daughter team behind warrriorwomen.ca. They perform and teach to share their love of Indigenous culture across Alberta, Canada. And they're also both artists in their own right and involved in different ways in building healthy community. So thank you so much for being here with me, both of you.
Thank you so much for having us.
And for people watching, we all have lived in the same town for a long time, and now you guys have kind of spread out a little bit. But we're still kind of local to each other. So it's very exciting for me to get to share you with my community. So
Yeah.
you guys, both of you, I would love for you to share with us what's lighting you up these days and what is either scaring you or angering you or just dredging up some like more murky emotion these days. Either one of you can start.
It's a good question. Mom, would you like to start or do you want me to start?
You're
Oh,
muted.
the only
Oh,
thing.
sorry. Why don't you go? Why don't you go ahead now, and then I'll take the next one first.
Okay, that sounds great. That's a good question. What is lighting me up? What is giving me a lot of emotion right now? I think it's not. I don't think this will surprise people when I mention that, there's a lot of discussions with Black Lives Matter, Indigenous Lives Matter, and I find myself being angry lots of the time, and just allowing myself to sit with that. I think I feel a shift. I feel a shift happening in the world right now in terms of, diversity, understanding more different cultures. The political landscape is a little bit messy, all of these different things that are happening. And what happens when you have a shift is you have tension, right? You have tension that's happening. And I very much feel that tension. I think it's important as a member and a person of color, who might not present as a person of color. It's important for me to really feel my emotions right now and understand that the way that I'm feeling is okay, and that it's been really important for me lately to take a step back. I find that I've been getting pretty overwhelmed by the conversations that have been happening, and a lot of people ultimately reach out to me to have these kind of discussions, but I have to be aware of my own emotional energy right now. So I'd say, yeah, in terms of that, that's kind of like what's getting me fired up lately. Is just, it frustrates me when there's no understanding, but then trying to understand why there's no understanding, those kind of things, and that all creates that tension that I was talking about.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. What about you, Matricia?
Well, I'm at the farmers market today, so I'm in a really happy place. One, our community is really supporting COVID and the safety measures, and wearing masks, and it's allowed me to get back to work and be creative and be personable as well. So that's lighting me up. And I've received some funding from my Indigenous organization, so I feel like my community is taking care of me, which I really appreciate. And I'm the same as Mackenzie. I have stepped back a bit from the conversation only because I already put myself out there as a knowledge keeper, and I find the same thing. I hate to say the word trigger, because that kind of puts me into like a victimization kind of mentality. But I would say that dealing with issues of race are always um, a little bit preloaded for me. And so I already feel my anxiety going up when I realize that, oh, this is that kind of conversation. And I think the things that anger me are that there's so much information out there and that people still want me to spoon feed it to them. And I find it so exhausting. I'm just so exhausted. And people are always like, yeah, I'd really like to know the history of Jasper. I'm like, well, it's online. It's really not hard to figure out. So I think those kind of things, you know, and then because I so relate to Black Lives Matter as a person of color, just from my own experiences, I think that it, like I said, I hate to use the word trigger, but it definitely resurfaces old feelings um, that and conversations that are tiresome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So level of exhaustion, I think, kind of kicks in.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And by the way, this is a total aside, but I love your hat. It looks fabulous on you.
Oh,
And
thank you.
not beaded though. So is it one of yours?
The beating.
Oh,
Oh, she's starting the beading on it. Oh, look at those. Those are so cute.
Yeah, I've got irises and peony or daffodils on one side and irises on the other.
okay.
Oh, my God,
So,
that's so cute.
and I'm just curious, is your artwork available through your website too? Are you linked to places where people could commission a hat or something else?
So I do get a lot of people reaching out, especially for the hats, because they are on a commission basis only, just simply because I've never had a hat that's been completed that hasn't already sold online, unfortunately. So most of my selling is done through Facebook and the farmers market and kind of pop-up markets where I'm available. You know, I have things for sale when I do my shows, which are, you know, a little bit further and farther in between. But I would say 90% of my sales are through people who reach out to me. And that actually keeps me pretty busy. So I mean, I wish I had enough time to stay or have enough stock to like actually sell things, but I love the commission basis too because I can personalize it.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. Okay, and you guys, how did you choose the name Warrior Women? I mean, it seems kind of self-evident, but I want you to share because other people won't know you. They won't have seen, you know, your the photography and all of that of you two standing with your drums and all of that. So how did you choose that?
I love this story. I love this story. I'll give it to my mom actually. Yeah.
Okay.
So when we first started, you know, we always say to each other, we're not meek women, we're warrior women. But I mean, we wanted to present ourselves in a way that was, I think, fierce, not just for ourselves, but for our culture, that we're standing up and fighting for ourselves as women. We're standing up and fighting for our culture. We're standing up and fighting for our right to drum as women. And then, in fact, we took it one step further where we would always wear these breastplates. And they were men's breastplates. We would wear these breastplates as sort of a way of saying, you know, we belong here too. We have a right to be where we're at. And I think we've definitely softened up in that particular aspect. But we get a lot of love for our name. People love the name Warrior Women. It's strong, it's powerful. And Warrior Women extends out to like our bigger circle of people, like Ty Groman is a warrior woman, Marla Pollock is a warrior woman, Teresa Westhaver is a warrior woman. Anybody who builds a drum and drums and stands up with us becomes one of our warrior women too. And so we've tribed in that particular aspect. Matt, do you want to add anything?
No, I think I think you hit the nail on the head. Yeah, really our name embodies that idea. You know, something that's really beautiful, I think, is the word women in Cree is esquoyo, and it comes from the two words mete, which means heart, and iskoteo, which means fire. So we are the heart fire. And I think that our name, Warrior Women, further embodies that. We are the heart fire. We are we are creation beings. We have a place within society, and I think that, yeah, that's the importance of our name.
And traditionally, the word warrior didn't actually mean like fighter, like how we think of it meaning kind of almost a soldier nowadays. The word warrior traditionally, like if you were called a warrior, that meant you took care of your family. That meant you were a provider. You provided for your family. You were a warrior. You stood up for your culture. And so it wasn't in sort of like these war terms. But I mean, that did come into play when people were trying to stand up for people, when, you know, they were being starved out or moved out or you know, reserved out, like when they were being, you know, subjugated into like a colonistic structure. The warriors stood up for us, you know, and those have become stories that that we remember. And so being able to tap into that energy as well, I think is a brilliant thing.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm just sometimes pausing to make sure our guests are muted here. Yeah, I love it. It feels really meaningful to me right now as well, like not from an Indigenous perspective, but just as a mama who is walking through heartache and wanting, you know, realizing that I will keep fighting for other people. Like I will, and I won't turn away from that. And this courage and the strength it requires for all of us to, you know, your story in our country is unique and needs to be heard, and all of us on maybe a smaller scale, we have stuff in our life that can either tear us down or can kind of call us to stand up and fight, or whatever with the tools, the resources, the voices that we have. So that feels important to me. Okay. So we're talking about coming home to ourselves, and I think coming home to ourselves has a lot of threads to it. Some of that is just figuring out our identity, right? Like, and identity isn't this one thing. It's like these threads, multiple, colorful, naughty, you know, sometimes messy threads that help create who we are. And I think that includes our strength and our struggle. It includes our story and the beautiful parts and the heartbreak and just all of it. Let's see, do I want to read out word for word? Well, I do want to say, so in my Brave and Beautiful membership, the focus is on this topic, identity and integration, coming home to ourselves, and kind of just exploring and owning who we are. Brene Brown writes, you either walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside your story and hustle for worthiness. This too feels like, I guess I don't talk about anything that doesn't matter to me, so it makes sense that it matters to me. But let's talk about your journey or path, you as individual humans, to embracing and celebrating who and how you are, or including, you know, how you're in progress, because I don't think we ever arrive. We're sort of always becoming. And if you don't mind, you could also include in that the way that you share and embody your Indigenous culture, because I feel like it is so important. Like, you know, you started out, Mac, talking about the this upheaval and a more awakening around the need for social change, for equality. You know, my husband is Black. You guys know this. He's an immigrant. We have Black children, and I have Indigenous family as well. And so I really don't think that, like, I believe, so I'm going on a rabbit trail, but I believe the idea that, like, we're not free until all of us are free. So I'm not free until all of us are free. And so when we're talking about even wholeness or integration, it's like, I don't think we can ignore these bigger things, right? Of like needing to own our story of even oppression and murder and all of these things, and making room for people to kind of step back into their wholeness and their beauty and their story and dignity and all of it. So what do you have to share about this? Mac, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can start for sure. This is such a good question, because I did so much work I took my degree in child and youth care services, and we did so much work on identity. And then it's super funny because I thought, like, oh, I got this in the bag. I've always felt like at a young age I kind of like clicked with who I am, but now I reflect back and I think, oh man, I had no idea. You're always changing, you're always evolving as a person. I think like a huge part of finding identity for me was one, finding my indigenous identity. And mom's story is like very interesting with that. But I was brought up with my indigenous culture, but then also I really ended up struggling in the last, like, well, I guess when I was like 16 to like now, struggling with the idea that I am an indigenous person, but I am white passing, right? So that's a whole other aspect of my identity, that I have the option to either present as an indigenous person or to not, right? And that became a big role for me. A lot of people, you can't see them now because I have like my shirt on, but I have a lot of tattoos, and a lot of my tattoos have syllabics in them and indigenous symbols, right? Because that's something that I chose, that I am an indigenous person no matter the color of my skin, the color of my eyes, right? I come from this long line of these amazing matriarchs, and I have a role and a responsibility to them. And so that's been like a really big part of my identity. um, I think too, another huge part of my identity was the people I surround myself with. And my mom taught me this. She always told me, you are who you surround yourself with. And I think that's very true, and not a lot of people really understand that has a huge role in your identity. I work with a lot of at-risk Indigenous youth, and a lot of times their identity is really, connected to who they spend their time with, what they're doing in their life. And it does make a big difference when you change your circle. I've spent time with people who have been toxic. I've spent time with people who have allowed me to grow. And really, I think one of the reasons why I am in my life at the place where I'm at is because of my community of support, and
Right.
that they play a huge part in my identity.
Yeah, and just a thought, because it is like we become like the people we spend time with, and also we betray ourselves sometimes in choosing the people we spend time with, right? Because we have to hide parts of who we are, even parts of our questioning or just whatever, in order to find belonging or acceptance. And I feel like that is also like a way of disowning who we are and harming ourselves.
Definitely. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of the most important things is identity. Even when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Identity and self-awareness, it's at the top. And sometimes people never reach that due to, struggles, hardships, poverty, those kind of things. But at the end of the day, that is what everybody's trying to figure out. They're trying to figure out, who am I? What makes me fired up? What makes me happy? All of these different things, right? And
Am I
yeah,
worthy of belonging? Am I worthy of love and acceptance?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Is there anything else, Mac, that you want to share that you feel like was a really important thread of you kind of stepping into wholeness? And you're still youngish, right? Like, so
Yeah.
you have a lot of beautiful years ahead to sort of, even continue. But where you are in your life right now, like, is there anything else that you want to share that has been sort of pivotal or really important in either in a painful way or a beautiful way, whatever, of you sort of becoming who you are?
Yeah, I want to share this story. So my Cree name is Kamamak, and Kamamak means butterfly. And the reason why I was gifted that name by my elder is because she said, you have the ability to go through darkness, and always come out beautiful at the end. And I think like a huge part of my identity has also been really shaped by, when I was about 13, I had an eating disorder and really struggled with that. And I think that was a huge part of me coming to terms with my identity, who I am. Am I okay in this body, right? Because that's a part of your identity as well. And then later on, about 2 years ago, I relapsed and had to go back into treatment. And I still see my dietitian. I still see my therapist on a regular basis. I think that has also really shaped my identity and who I am. And like I thought, oh, I got this in the bag, I know who I am. And then I relapsed, right? And that was a huge turning point for me, where I was like, maybe I don't know who I am. Maybe I'm trying to cope with not knowing who I am or not knowing my path, and I'm trying to cope with it in this way, right? I think a lot of people, eating disorders, they're like a form of addiction in a way, because you're addicted to having control. And so you can control food, you can control exercise, you can control your outer body, right? And really when I ended up healing was when I started looking at all parts of myself, my mental health, my physical health, my emotional health, my spiritual health. And all of that comes and plays a huge part of my identity and who I am. And I still struggle with that. And I think it's because I'm not fully balanced in all of those areas. And I'm still on that journey of who am I, what is my path. And I think a lot of people that struggle with addictions, it's a similar process for them as well.
One of the things that I try to encourage people a lot in my work, though, and then I have to live this out, or I choose to live this out too, though, is the sense that my worthiness and my value as a human being, though, has nothing to do with me arriving or becoming fully healed, whatever that looks like. It really is part of common humanity. Part of self-compassion is common humanity, which says we're all kind of just messy. Like, we deal with trauma. Like, so for instance, I don't hide this, the panic attacks, the results of trauma and loss of my beautiful boy. This is not something I'm not less than because I experience what it means to be fully human in this messy world, right? So I think I feel like that's an important piece of this conversation, is that we have permission to be messy. We just all are, right? We're all figuring this out to the best of our ability, trying to heal, trying to love, trying to, and I think that matters too. And I can imagine, like, for a lot of, I'm guessing, but I can imagine for a lot of the youth that you work with, that can be helpful too, is like knowing that other people struggle too. Like, we're all just going through this world, figuring it out.
I totally agree. And it's one of those things that I don't think we talk enough about what a crappy time we're having. I think for a lot of the youth that I worked with, properly disclosing to them about my own struggles, or that I felt the exact same way that they have. I think when we are in grief, we feel very alone, because we feel like nobody has ever gone through it, right? And us as humans, we're not very good about talking about the hurting part of things, but it's a natural part. We're taught in our culture that it's a natural part of us, right? Our heartbeat even is composed of a strong beat and a weak beat, but they go together. And they need to go together, right? It's all about balance within life, but I think that we don't focus on that.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing part of your story. Matricia, would you jump in?
So I had to plug in my phone because I thought it was going to die. So I'm just sitting in my car now. So sorry about the location change. But so this is a really big one for me. Obviously, this is something I struggled with my entire life. Just simply being an Indigenous person means that 80% of our Indigenous people are displaced. I recently posted a Facebook that 20% of the Indigenous people that were taken from homes originally, like my age, were also adopted overseas and down into the States. And the reason why that's important is because those adoptions are closed. So I had a brother who was adopted down into the States, and the adoption, they will never, ever unseal it. It was a closed adoption. It'll always be a closed adoption. He may not even know he's adopted. And even if he does, he may have a really hard time trying to find us if he doesn't get information that's disclosed. So I know that sounds like a weird thing, but me being adopted with my brother was a really awesome thing, because there was two of us. So even though we were adopted into a family with another sibling, and then my dad got remarried and had another sibling, my brother and I obviously have a connection that I probably won't ever have with my sister, just that it's just that one step of removal. And my brother and I have a shared pain past. So, you know, we have the same loss story, the loss of our first family. And I take a look at my niece and my nephew right now. They're the same age as my brother and I that were adopted. And the thing that really hits me in the face is they're so, functionable in their family. Like, they already have personalities, they already speak, a language. And we were taken out of that environment, speaking Cree, and put into another family. And then basically, it's a sink or swim. And then I remember as a teenager being just sad for no reason. And now we know that that's depression. But just sort of dealing with that entire pain past, I really had to kind of accept it as part of who I am, as my identity. And that, I think, took a long time. And recently just went through the 60 scoop. And I don't know if you know this, but there was a settlement with the Canadian government. And I remember my elder saying this when she got her payment. She said, it doesn't matter how much they pay you. It doesn't fix that hole that you have in your past or in your space. It doesn't take away that pain. It'll never bring my brother back. It'll never, restore my original mother's suicide. It'll never mend the relationships that I have with my current family. It's just a dollar bill at the end of the day. And yet we're told that that's a settlement, which means in some way, or shape, or form that that's the door closed, that we shouldn't complain anymore. And yet none of those feelings go away. So I guess, starting to be a drummer and embracing my culture, and my children's story, and that was my story, was, as opposed to showing people all of the broken parts of our culture, I really wanted to focus on the beautiful parts of our culture, because those are the beautiful parts of me. And those are the parts that I wanted to see and that I wanted to pass on, because there are so many sad stories. And I think people, and I don't mean this in a bad way, it's just that even for myself, I had to, in order to move on, I had to stop. I mean, I think that other people need to hear the pain parts, but it's different when you're living them. Right. And I had to find another reason to move forward. And by learning and embracing the beautiful parts of my culture, that helped me move forward. Like, Warrior Women helped me identify myself. In fact, I think Warrior Women is my identification. And then also not invalidating, but disallowing other people to determine my identity. So as opposed to, I think there was a lot of times in my 20s where I looked outside for other people's validation. What do you see in me? How do you refer to me? And then I just, in my 30s, I just stopped. I was just like, you know what do I see in me? How do I identify myself? And then I realized, instead of looking for outside validation, I started internalizing my own validation. And I realized that self-acceptance for me was looking inside and not outside. And then I think that's when my light was truly able to shine. At least I think. I'm still a work in progress.
I love that. Okay, I'm hearing feedback where you guys are.
Oh, now I'm not. I was, though, too.
Okay, hopefully it's just self-corrected. So I do actually want to dive into this one. I thought, I wasn't sure how much time we would have, but maybe we'll speak fast. I don't know. Do you have, can we at least touch on the idea, like mother, daughter, different generations, same country, same province, but I'm guessing that you have a slightly different experience of the messaging in media, in your from your peer group, from whatever, about who you're supposed to be, or about identity, success, beauty. Is there anything that comes up for you that you want to share on? Have you chatted about this together, about the messaging you receive around worth or beauty or anything in our Canadian culture even? Does that even come up for you guys?
Can I take this one, Mac?
Mm-hmm.
First? Okay. So I think, like, for myself, a lot of girls Mackenzie's age are starting to have babies, and they're like, oh, Kuka Matricia. And I'm like, well, wait, I'm not a grandmother yet. Like, please don't define me. I said, you can call me auntie. Because I don't know if I feel that role, but I guess I am in that age bracket where people are looking at me. And I think because I've always been a lot of people have thought I was 10 years younger. So I'm starting to age, and I can definitely feel that in how society treats me a little bit differently, which is always a bit surprising. I think that as an entertainer, that beauty is is an expectation, or at least to present in a certain way. I also think I don't really care too much what people think about me and my and what I wear, but I do think about how I want to present myself, and I pick certain things to wear because they show my culture, and that's really important to me. Not because I want validation from other people, but because wearing those things make me feel beautiful, make me feel cultural, make me feel powerful. And I think those are things that I also want to represent, like, I also, like, this is a mask that Mackenzie bought me that has indigenous beading. So it's from another Nietzsche, so I like to be able to promote. I think I'm at that point, but I also feel that I'm also going more into a mentor role. I know that there's lots of people who want me to move into a elder role, and so I don't know if I'm ready for that. I'm still working on the knowledge keeper role, and I'm working also into this new medicine women role, and so redefining what medicine is in our culture and what healing actually means in a cultural sense, as opposed to what we see in society. So I think all of those things sort of come into play. I think that especially as a woman, there's a judgment and an expectation for us to remain young. And I think that's so unfair. I've totally embraced my gray hair. I'm totally learning to love my wrinkles. And I do think that within our culture, we're pretty revered, because moving into a kukum and moving into an elder role is actually, a great honor. But I don't know if that pervades into the rest of society. But that's just, my musings. What do you have to say, Mac?
Oh God. I think society has had like a huge role to play in who I feel I should be, who I think I should be. I think, a lot of, well, one, like mainstream media, especially for my generation and the younger generations, play a huge role. And I know that played a big role in like my body image. It's just huge. And I remember feeling so free. I met this girl a couple months ago, and she told me, she was like, hey, I'm going to tell you something. You can make Instagram and Facebook and all your media platforms that you're on, you can teach it what to show you. And so I unfollowed and blocked every fitness blog. Whenever an advertisement comes up for like fitness, or like skinny is the new healthy, whatever, like I block it. And now like my media is full of these beautiful, diverse colorful bodies. And it's just like that, it totally changed how I saw myself. And it was just this amazing thing because I grew up in an era where cell phones were introduced to me when I was about 13. Same with Facebook. And so that's a pivotal age in your identity formation. And so my identity is really tied to media. And so what is being showcased in media is celebrities, right? These all of these tan fit celebrities, right? And so I know that media played a huge role in that. And I think media also, there is this sexualization of Indigenous women that happens in media and continues to happen. And I see a lot of the Indigenous community, they're trying to take that back, and showcase, like, I have a really good friend who's an Indigenous burlesque dancer, because she's like, screw your sexualization of Indigenous women. This is what it means for me and my sexuality, and to be a burlesque dancer. We see a lot of people reclaiming that identity, because I feel for a lot of Indigenous people, our identity was taken away from us. And people were like, here is the identity of a European person that you should be. But now we're trying to reverse that. And I feel like this push and pull sometimes in myself and my generation, between media, but then also the reclamation of Indigenous identity as well.
Yeah, thank you guys both. Yeah, such a big, the kind of fun conversation. Important, I think. So okay, so yeah, so let's talk about, you started out with the warrior women, and I don't feel like I articulated this very well, but one of my, I call them mind, body, spirit intentions for this season of life is brave. And brave, it's funny, and I even named my membership Brave and Beautiful, which, like, believe me, that was challenging, because for most of my life, never would I have identified as brave or beautiful. So even that was this tiny coming home to myself, owning my strength, owning my bravery, which in no way means I'm not struggling and suffering and afraid and all the things. It just means also I am brave. And part of that for me is a refusal to turn away from conversations that not just impact my family directly, but also impact my family directly. And therefore, like, there's not a chance I'm going to turn away from these conversations. They're hard, they're anxiety producing, and they're really important. And so for us, that includes things like talking about mental illness, removing shame and stigma from being a beautiful human who also lives with mental illness and needs support in that area of life. Just like no shame, like any more than, I have thyroid disease. It's just part of this physiological makeup or part of who I am. And so racial equality is part of that, LGBTQ rights, part of that. And so, but it's not easy. Like, when we want to belong, when we're trying to figure out, like, where are the spaces where I kind of fit, or, who are my people? This is actually I don't know if you feel like it's simple. I don't feel like it's simple. I feel like it's actually really painful and stretching to speak up bravely, even as we're in progress and even as we're learning about issues that matter to us, but speaking up. That probably my personal journey to this place led me to probably, my new mantra for my birthday year. So every birthday I choose a new mantra for my year. And this year it's simply tell the truth. And that can mean, different things for each of us. But for me, I think it does mean, in part, continuing to own who I am, own my beautiful family, helping my children just embrace who they are, modeling that, anyway. So all of that, I feel incredibly passionate about. I also feel very raw about these things, but I want to hear from you guys. So if you, framed that idea. So tell the truth. If you kind of held that for this next year for yourself, what would that look like? What would that sound like and feel like for you to kind of bravely tell the truth in your own life, as you continue to move towards wholeness and integration, or kind of walk that out? Mac, you're front and center here for me. So do you want to dive on in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, one of our seven sacred teachings is honesty. And honesty and truth, I feel like they go together with one another. And it doesn't just mean being truthful to other people, not telling lies, but it means sticking with your own beliefs, right? And finding truth in what you're doing, and yeah, how you go forward in your life. I think truth is actually really hard, and I don't think people think about it sometimes, that it's very hard to be truthful. And we see that in being truthful to the emotions that you're feeling, being truthful to maybe if you're struggling mentally, being truthful to your body, being truthful to your friends and your relationships. But yeah, when I think about being truthful in my life, that's really what I think. I think a huge part for me would be being truthful to myself and what I'm feeling, because I think I am a person who struggles with mental health, but I'm a very high functioning person. So I'm good at pushing that stuff down. But being truthful to myself means that I feel those things that I'm feeling, that I have conversations about that, and that I don't push them away, but yet I give myself the respect to feel, and to just know that whatever I'm feeling is okay to feel, and that it's better to deal and come to terms with that pain or that anxiety before I move forward. I think that's what being truthful really means to me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. And that's where I think it gets tricky, because like truth is like, it is subjective. Like we don't all agree on it, but am I walking in integrity?
Mm-hmm.
Am I walking in integrity? That's my business. And and if I get off path, am I owning that and coming on back? Like just that constant kind of movement. I think it is a constant movement as we learn and we discover and we, unlearn and dismantle things that we used to maybe believe in or whatever. Yeah, thank you. Matricia, what are your thoughts on this idea of tell the truth, or even just like, what would it look, sound, feel like for you to just say yes to showing up brave? And I suspect you're already doing that, but also what could it look like, sound like, feel like as you move through the rest of the year?
Yeah, so I think for myself, and I agree with Mackenzie, like with the 7 sacred teachings, with the fireside chats, I've been doing one of each. And so last week I did do it on honesty, and it's called Tapwewin. And so when I break that word down in sort of English, it's like tapping the drum, we win. And that was just kind of like a little way of me remembering it. But it actually, it goes with the raven, it goes with the giant, goes with Sasquatch, honesty. And the reason why it goes with those sort of bigger animals is because when we tell the truth, we stand up tall and we stand up straight, and we become like giants with the people around us. And so honesty starts within ourselves, and then it goes out towards our community. So we can't actually be honest as a knowledge keeper. I can't actually be honest with my community if I'm not honest with myself first. And sometimes being honest can be, like I said, those conversations and being honest with people can be hard, and it can be exhausting. And so I find that, back in the day, I would just get quiet. If somebody, I didn't want to have that exhausting conversation with people. And so I would just stop talking. And there's if you're having a conversation with a person of color and all of a sudden they're really silent, then you need to stop talking, because there is something wrong with the conversation. They want to share, but they don't feel like they're being heard. And so when people want to share and they're not being heard, or when they're not, listening, and just to kind of, I'll tell you a story. So last week, there was this woman that came up to me, and she's a guide in town. And she just said, I really need to like learn some Indigenous stories so I can tell all those stories of the past. And I'm like, we're still here. And she's like, yeah, because I really just want to sit down and hear your thoughts. And I said, yeah, sure, let's have this conversation. Yeah, and I just really need to be able to do that so I can, use those things in my guiding. And I said, well, that's appropriation. Yeah, and I just really want to, I just want to like tell the history, the stories of the people that were originally here. And I'm like, well, we're still here, and the people that are here are not. And she just kept talking, and I just stopped engaging, because she presented that she wanted to hear, but what she actually wanted was somebody to spoon feed her Indigenous legends that she could use in her guiding, so that she could, quote unquote, present an Indigenous experience. But who's writing that history? Is that history whitewashed? Is it really? And are you usurping a space where maybe somebody else could be telling that history? And she was talking, she wasn't listening. And so, I don't know where I'm going here with this particular story, but I guess in being honest with myself, I realized she wasn't being honest with herself. What I wanted to tell her was not what she wanted to hear. And so she wasn't listening, so I just stopped. So I had to be honest with myself in that particular minute that she was not really connecting with me and my stories and my truth.
Yeah.
Even though I think she thought she was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so truth telling can look like setting boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, your boundary was, I'm just going to step back here, because there's no point pouring out energy, right, if somebody isn't willing to receive it. It can look like sometimes speaking up when it's challenging. It can look like so many different ways. And I like that. Matricia, so I really appreciated that one little clue you gave about, like, if we're talking over somebody, how we might use that body language to kind of just get a clue here, like, okay, just pause, stop talking for a moment. Do you have any idea of what could, like, if I was in that situation, I realized, okay, something, I may not know what I did wrong or what's wrong for sure, but I can notice the feeling and I can pause. What's a phrase I could use maybe to invite? What do you think? What would you have liked maybe to happen in that situation? Because then the people like myself and listening, we can use that as an idea in conversation.
Yeah, so even something simple like, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, yeah.
I'm thinking that we have a gap in Indigenous culture in Jasper. Do you feel the same way? Okay. What are your thoughts on this? Just clearly asking for feedback and then stopping.
Great. Okay.
And also, she approached me while I was at the farmer's market, which is a visual place for me to be, but perhaps not always the greatest time to have that conversation. And so maybe saying, hey, is this a time to have this conversation? Or when can we get together to have this conversation? Or can I send you some of these questions on email and we can get together? Or is there somebody else who I could approach with these questions? Mm-hmm. Or even, should we have this conversation, or is there some kind of work that I should be doing first? Yeah, I appreciate that, right?
Yeah, thank you. So I just recently listened to Seven Fallen Feathers, and Tanya Talaga, Anishinaabe Canadian journalist, is the author of that book. It was hard, but it was hard for me right now because it was full of loss, and I've just lost my child, but I think it's a valuable book. And but she says, I don't remember right now if she wrote this or said it, but if you are conditioned not to care, you are conditioned to indifference, and there's a violence to that indifference. Can we talk about this? I think this is a very relevant conversation because there's so much stuff happening that I think, like, I actually totally honor, Matricia, like what you said is, you're not, like, when you have been, like, when violence has been perpetrated against you, it's not your job to immerse yourself in that so that you can teach, right? Like, you have a right to tend to yourself, and other people are called to journalism, to activism, whatever, but also I think we have to own our own part of the story and do our own work, like, which is what you keep saying is like, but and also because I struggle hard with anxiety, I know the importance of boundaries. I know that I have to choose my battles. I have to think, okay, these are the things I'm going to really speak up about, and I can't speak up about all the things. So it's like complex, because we have to stay whole. And if we fall apart, then we can't love people and help people. But also I think there is a lot of turning away from, just turning away from because it's uncomfortable, turning away from because we don't want to do our own learning, turning away from for all sorts of reasons. And I think that's dangerous, right? We need people to not turn away from things so that we can make positive change in this world. So, but from your perspective, what would you like to share about this thought that if you're conditioned not to care, you're conditioned to indifference, and there's a violence to that indifference? So I guess, what, do you agree with that? Do you not? And then if you could wave your wand, your I don't know what to say in your culture, something culturally, I don't know, I'll just make a mess and say something inappropriate, but I'm thinking of like some magical, beautiful change in this world. What would that thing be and why? So like one thing that you could just like change today. Matrica, are you comfortable?
Yeah, so I'll share a story. My son came home one time in about grade 6, and he said, "We got to talk." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And pulled out the chairs, and he sat down. He said, do you know what the white people have done to the First Nations people?" He says, "You know what they've done to us?" And I'm like, "Well, of course I know what they've done to us." I said, "This is my story. This is my life. This is everything I've been through. It's my history." And he said, "Well, why didn't you share this with me?" And I said to him, "You know, Tristan," I said, "I wasn't keeping you in ignorance." I said, some suitcases are too heavy for you to carry too early. And I didn't want to pass, my pain passed on to him at a time when he might not be able to deal with it. And so because it was being shared in school and it opened his eyes, he came home and we were able to have that conversation at that time. So I think if I could change the world, I mean, there's a story that, when we go to heaven, when we go to the star world, we know everything and therefore we understand everything. So knowledge is power, but people have to understand they have to educate themselves. And so when you know everything about everybody, you totally understand where they're coming from, but not everybody knows everything about everybody. But when you get to heaven, they say you learn everything about everybody, you understand everything. And I wish that could happen, that people could get themselves, into a knowledge base arena. But understanding all of that knowledge is painful, and it's uncomfortable, and people, good vibes only, right? And we have this, thing, it's called Facebook, and we're taught in our culture the heartbeat. And the heartbeat goes with a weak and it goes with a strong, and that means that we have weak parts of our days and we have strong parts of our days, and we have weak times but they come with the good times, and that we have a shadow self but it comes with the light self, and everything is within balance, and that you have the good and that you have the bad, and that you have the ugly but you have the beautiful, and that they all go together. And we're taught that during the dark times we remember the light is around the corner, and during the bad times we rely on our circle of support, but during the good times we gather our circle of support. And during the good times, we become a circle of support. We look for the people that are maybe in the dark times and support them. And that the good goes with the bad, and that the ugly goes with the beautiful, and that the weak goes with the strong, and that we have good days and then we have bad days. And those days, those things can even happen within our days, right? And that all of that belongs to each other. It's all a matter of balance. But if we look on Facebook, it's all good, it's all good, it's all good, it's all good. We'd never see the bad. So it's unbalanced a relationship to see everybody's good vibes only posts, because that's not realistic. That's not life. That's not balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's my thoughts.
Yeah. And so like, cause I actually try to be real online, and even in my willingness to just reveal and share hard stuff, it's still like, how much can I share of my, like, it's nobody else's business, some of that. And they wouldn't want to see how ugly it looks to grieve the loss of your child. Like, it ain't pretty. It's horrific. So yeah, it's like, even in an attempt to be, honest online, it's like, what do I share? 2% of my life, 5% of the reality, right? So it's, yeah. Although I think community in places where we can be real with each other and learn from each other, it's like, if we don't have these spaces, then I can't learn how to love you better. I can't, right? Like, I can't grow and I can't stretch unless I have places to kind of practice. So, yeah. So what do you think? Anything comes up for you, Mackenzie, about this idea?
Yeah, I mean, when you said that quote, I thought of another one, and it's the idea of a child who doesn't feel cared for will burn down the community to feel its warmth, right? And so I think care, at the end of the day, is one of the most important things. When my mom and I drum and sing, we teach the beautiful parts of our culture, right? But we try to connect with everybody, because when you connect, and when you connect with somebody, and when you learn about them, you end up caring about them. And when you care about something, you won't intentionally hurt it. And honestly, that goes into my idea of, if I could wave a magic wand tomorrow, I would wish for connection and for care among people, because I think that we are disconnected from one another. And I think that when we care about one another, we try to understand. I think that comes first.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me too how, like, it's easy to dehumanize somebody, like, from a distance, but you get up close and personal and you realize, oh, they have a sense of humor. Oh, they just want to keep their baby safe. Oh, they have hopes. And like, it's like, we just realize. And I love that about travel. And I love that about meeting interesting humans. Like, is that, hopefully I'm not dehumanizing you before we meet, but yeah, I just see that as one of the gifts, I guess, of meeting people more up close and personal.
Well, that's prevalent in our society right now. Well, it's just the old people dying. Well, that's a horrible way of looking at loss. But everybody's like, well, I don't mind. It's, they're going to die anyway, as long as it's not my grandmother.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, as long as it's a nameless person that was already 95, geez, that seems old enough. So, like, what the hey, like, that it's not a sad thing that they've expired. Well, it is, because it was our responsibility. And as a community, we can practice things within our control and stop that. And even the missing and murdered women in our society, like somebody actually said, well, isn't it the Indigenous men that are killing the Indigenous women? And I'm like, how is that any better? That's even worse. Then that's a cycle of systemic violence within our culture. And I said, like, so because it doesn't involve, white people, that it's somehow better in our culture, that's even worse. Yeah. So I mean, we have all of these things that we kind of like, maybe not dehumanize, but we put it into a carton or into a box that makes us feel better. And those statements can be very harmful and destructive, because they minimize the amount of pain that's within those particular instances.
Yeah, but they also, I feel like that also is a cop-out, in the sense that it's like, but science shows us links between trauma and intergenerational trauma and depression, addiction, other mental health issues. It's like, we can't, like, that's also just avoiding responsibility. like if we say, oh yeah, but that's just like, you know, like when we talk about police brutality and people bring up, oh, but what about Black on Black violence? It's like, okay, but that's actually part of the conversation here. It's like weird, like we have to own the links here between, you know, anyway, this is you know, that's such a big conversation, but I do feel frustrated by that as well. It's like, we can never repair or move forward unless we own the story. And part of the story is, yeah, like there are these symptoms of deep pain and wounding. Where did that come from? How do we, you know, address the pain and wounding so that these people can move back into wholeness and come home to themselves, right? So yeah. Is there anything else? Oh, go ahead, Matricia.
Oh, I was just going to say, and even if you're in a place like of, you know, I feel prosperous in my life. I feel blessed to be surrounded by the friends that I have and my children. And I love the work that I'm doing. It feels connected. But every time somebody pervades towards my race, I get hurt, even though it's not me. So every time I hear of an Indigenous person going missing or murdered, or I hear of a painful story, you know, that still hurts me. And that can often be a concept that's hard to explain to other people as well. You know, that even if you're in a great place, if your race is still suffering, then you are also suffering as well. And it kind of goes to what you said before, until we're all healed, you know, I'm not healed.
Yeah, like I can't even just want a safer world for my baby. Like, what about their babies? What about the people they love most? Like yeah. And so that it's interesting. I don't know if you like Brene Brown at all, but she, a lot of people know her work, and she talks about how belonging starts, like it has to start with us belonging to ourselves, before we can actually like fully belong to other people. And from a cultural sense, like I don't really know, but from just as a human, I feel that loving myself first, really accepting myself, the shadow, the light, beautiful, the strengths I bring to the world, and all of that, just that loving myself, and then I can show up to my relationships. I can show up and try, hopefully in a healthier way, to make a positive difference in the community around me, because I am belonging to myself first, but there's this bi-directional impact. So what happens out there hurts us. What happens in here, if I don't do my own work, will spill out and hurt as well. So we're not like, so this is off the cuff, Matricia, but I am wondering from the perspective of your Indigenous and spiritual roots, like the spiritual roots that kind of come from your culture, what would you share about this idea of like belonging to each other even? Because I feel like, you know, like there's a sense of like what happens to the earth even, right? Like the environment, it affects us. So we're not separate from. So do you have any just other thought to share about, you know, for people who want for Canada to be whole and healthier? A final thought, you know, I'm putting you on the spot, and I think you might be frozen. Are you there, Matricia? If not, oh yeah, you are, okay.
There we go, sorry. So you're talking about another one of the seven sacred teachings, which is like basically working together in community. And I think when we talk about community, it's different than a relationship, right? So there's our own self-healing, our, you know, aligning our body, mind, and spirit. And then there's the sort of family togetherness. But then there's our friend circle, you know, our circle. And then there's the basic, you know, general circle. And so when we talk about belonging or together or working together or harmony as a sacred teaching, there's, you know, sort of different levels of community that follow with that. Can you repeat your question?
Do I remember my question? I think I don't even remember how I got to that question, nor the question. So basically, do you have any final thoughts about just maybe encouragement or a way of seeing how we really, it matters? Like I need to care about you. I need to, and about the health of you know, people who maybe, like, I'm not part of that group, but we are part of this world together, and somehow, you know, anyway, just.
Well, I mean, if I have to leave a final thought, I would think that the pandemic kind of sums it all up. Like, we have to care about each other in order to move forward with it, right? And when we don't care about each other, when we're, you know, living in a world that is stacked on top of each other, and that's so busy physically, you know, where we don't have our own personal space, then Mother Nature has taken it upon herself to correct the situation. And we are actually really powerless against that unless we work together cooperatively. And I think this is a real time where we can actually surge together in a loving way by taking care of each other. And that even includes, you know, our most vulnerable, like our elderly and our children, which, you know, of course we cherish. So the pandemic has forced us to stop and to think and to be uncomfortable and to adopt new behaviors. And we knew that this was coming in one way, shape, or form, and that it's not, you know, a targeted thing or a government thing, that it's just nature in its own way of belonging to us. I think it's a pretty powerful statement.
Thank you. Mack, do you have any final thoughts before we say goodbye? Any final word, like a bit of wisdom, a word of encouragement for other people, even exploring this idea of coming home to themselves or figuring out kind of who they are and loving themselves?
I think, you know, when I was taking my degree, we learned about, and my mom has talked to me about this before, we learned about our soul cup, you know, and every single day we pour our soul cup into our friendships, into doing homework, into all of those different things. But at the end of the day, if we don't have anything left in our soul cup, then we don't have anything to give. So what are you doing to fill up your soul cup and to fill up yourself, right? I think that we forget about that sometimes, that we need to take care of ourselves first. And sometimes people think, oh no, that's selfish. No, it's not, because at the end of the day, your longevity of being able to care is lengthened. You are able to care at a higher capacity because you have cared for yourself, right? You know, like I hate to use this, but like RuPaul at the end of every single like episode of Drag Race, he says, if you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you gonna love somebody else? And that is, it's so true. It's so true. So I think at the end of the day, the journey for self-love is long, it's hard, it's painful, but it's the most important thing that you'll ever do.
Yeah. Thank you both so much for joining me today, for having the conversation. Where would you like people to connect with your work?
You can go to our website. It's www.warrriorwomen.ca, and Warrior Women is spelled with 3 R's, so WARRRIOR.
That. Oh,
Luckily, we've done enough marketing through our website that it's the first to pop up, but it does have 3 R's in it. Or through Facebook. We also have Facebook at Warrior Women.
okay. And do you, like, right now we're limited with the pandemic, but I had said that, like, it seems like you mostly stick in Alberta. Do you go beyond, if somebody, you know, when they're allowed and they want to bring your work to their community, do you go beyond our province?
Well,
Yeah.
we've been really lucky. In January, we got to go to New York with Travel Alberta. And then in February, March, we were in Abidjan, Massa.
Africa.
So we've been traveling fairly internationally and within Canada, within BC. I mean, obviously, a lot of those travels are not applicable at this point in time, but we hope that our message is universal. And the beautiful thing about connecting virtually is people can connect from anywhere at any time. And so those things work in our favor as well, as far as reaching out to the people that hopefully have been part of our grandmother web. And you had mentioned too how we're all connected, and in our culture we call that the grandmother's spider teachings, that anything that happens to any part of the web happens to all of us, and that we're all interconnected.
Yeah.
So we do have to care.
Mamawi, we are all together. We are all connected.
Beautiful. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.